The night Julian tried to rob me wasn't just a betrayal, it was the chilling culmination of years of greed and entitlement. I knew he was unhappy with my modest retirement, constantly hinting that I should liquidate my assets, my fully paid-off house, my small, quiet investments, to enjoy my golden years, meaning, of course, to free up money for Leda and him. But I had my reasons for living simply, secrets carefully guarded after a lifetime of hard lessons. Julian, my daughter Leda's arrogant husband, was always the flashy one, obsessed with appearances, living beyond his means, and always looking for a shortcut. He saw me, a retired widower living in a perfectly ordinary house, as a weak link, an easy target. He assumed I was old, frail, and, most importantly, oblivious. He assumed I had hidden cash, perhaps gold, stashed away like some eccentric old fool. He was wrong. He was catastrophically wrong. The night it happened, I was supposedly asleep in my bed, but I wasn't. I was waiting. I had seen the signs, the sudden, intense questioning about my safe, the casual jokes about hidden treasures, the way his eyes lingered on the antique chest in my study. So when I heard the faint, metallic click of the back door, followed by the soft, deliberate footsteps creeping through my living room, I didn't panic. I just listened. Julian was a shadow, moving expertly, his flashlight beam sweeping across my familiar walls. He headed straight for my study, confirming my darkest suspicions. He was looking for something specific, something he thought he deserved. As he forced open the small, antique wooden chest I kept on my desk, the one he'd always eyed, I knew his greed had finally led him down a path he could never return from. He rummaged inside, his breath heavy, expectant. But what he found wasn't a stack of cash or glimmering jewels. What he found was far more destructive. The antique chest Julian broke into didn't contain anything valuable, at least not in the way he understood value. It contained paperwork, years of meticulously organized legal documents, photos, and letters. But there, right on top, Julian found the first shock, a certified letter from the state attorney's office. It wasn't about me, it was about him. I'd been watching Julian for months, ever since Leda started complaining about their sudden crippling debt. Julian, always needing to appear wealthy, had been using his company credit cards for personal luxury expenses and covering it up with fake invoices. I had hired a discreet private investigator, not to catch him cheating, but to check his finances before considering him for my estate. The investigator had delivered a damning report. Julian was deep in a hole, facing embezzlement charges if his firm found out, and he was desperate. This desperate need was the key to my house that night. My tension had been building for years, fueled by the constant, disrespectful entitlement from both Julian and Leda. Leda, my own daughter, had grown cold and dismissive since marrying Julian, seeing me only as a potential future cash cow. She never called except to complain about money or subtly push me toward retirement homes so they could get their hands on the house. I remember her last visit. She looked around my study and said with a profound pity, "Dad, you really need to sell this place. It's too big and frankly, it looks tacky." Tacky. My home, the place her mother and I built together, was tacky because it didn't fit their high society image. Julian's decision to rob me was the final, unforgivable betrayal, a confirmation that they valued my money more than my life. So when Julian saw that first document, a letter detailing the extent of his financial crimes, his heart must have pounded with fear. But then he found the second item, buried just beneath the criminal file, a faded, certified death certificate. It wasn't mine. It was Leda's, or rather a death certificate for Eliza Rose Thorne, a name I hadn't used in 3 decades, and the birth name of my daughter. The date of death was 22 years ago, just 2 weeks after she was born. Julian, crouched in the dark, clutching these 2 pieces of paper, his criminal life and his wife's dead identity, was now completely paralyzed. He didn't just find secrets, he found the truth that obliterated his entire marriage, his inheritance, and his future. He didn't know it yet, but the woman he married, the woman he thought would make him rich, wasn't my biological daughter at all. And that was the secret I had been protecting all these years. Julian's horrified gasp was the sweetest sound I'd heard in years. He finally knew he wasn't just dealing with a sleepy old man. He was dealing with a meticulously prepared avenger. I switched on the study light, the sudden brightness blinding him as he scrambled to cover the papers. "Put the criminal file down, Julian. Pick up the death certificate," I commanded, my voice calm but hard as granite. He obeyed, his hands shaking as he stared at the name. Eliza Rose Thorne. "Leda. Leda's middle name is Rose. What is this, Frank?" His voice was thin, stripped bare of all arrogance. This was the moment of confrontation, the moment I detonated the bomb I'd been sitting on for 3 decades. I walked over to the chest and pulled out a small framed photo of a beautiful, smiling woman, my late wife. My wife, bless her soul, was infertile. We tried for years. When Leda was 2 weeks old, her biological mother, a young, panicked woman we knew, died suddenly. My wife and I adopted Leda immediately. We changed her first name, but kept her middle name, Rose, to honor her biological mother, Eliza Thorne. Julian looked between the death certificate and the criminal file, his brain struggling to compute the monumental implications. But Leda told me you were her biological father, that she was the sole heir to your estate. His entire marriage, his financial strategy was built on that lie. I delivered the crushing absolute truth. Leda is my adopted daughter, a daughter I raised and loved fiercely. But legally, she has absolutely no claim to my bloodline, my name, or my inheritance, unless explicitly stated in a will. And I assure you, Julian, in my last will, which I just updated 2 days ago, Leda is entirely absent. The color drained from his face as he realized the truth. The inheritance he had been trying to speed up by robbing me, the one he was gambling his freedom on, didn't exist for him or Leda. It never had. But the ultimate shock was yet to come. I pointed to the criminal file Julian had dropped. And as for that, the embezzlement file from your firm, I didn't hire that investigator just for due diligence, Julian. I hired him to get proof of your crimes. I have been sitting on that evidence for 3 months, waiting for a sign, a single act of respect or humanity from you or Leda that would make me spare you. I stepped closer, my shadow looming over him. You chose this. You broke into my home tonight not to check on me, but to commit armed robbery. That act, Julian, was the trigger. The police are already on their way. He lunged for the back door, but I was faster. I hit the security button hidden beneath the desk. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home and the alarm siren wailing was the soundtrack to Julian's absolute, total defeat. He spun around, his eyes wide with animal panic, realizing the only thing he had found in my chest was the proof of his ruin and the betrayal of his wife's entire identity. He was trapped. The man who came to steal wealth found a truth that destroyed his life and implicated my own daughter, Leda, in years of deceit. Julian screamed, a guttural sound of pure panic, realizing the walls had just closed in on him. He grabbed the criminal file and the death certificate, stuffing them frantically into his pocket. But it was too late. He was cornered. I stood by the light switch, watching him. This was the climax, the devastating moment of reckoning. I didn't need to fight him. The truth and the law were already delivering the blows. You came for money, Julian. You found the end of your freedom. That file you're holding, that's my insurance. I had it prepared months ago, specifically to protect my estate from your financial recklessness. Now it's evidence in your armed robbery attempt. The front door burst open and 2 police officers rushed into the study, flashlights blazing. Julian was immediately subdued, placed in handcuffs, and read his rights. I watched the officer methodically retrieve the criminal file and the death certificate from Julian's pocket, cataloging them as evidence. I calmly pointed to the forced lock on the chest. "He broke in, officers. He was looking for hidden cash he assumed I had." As they led Julian away, defeated and silent, I turned my attention to the true victim, the woman Julian had only married for her perceived inheritance, Leda. I called her, my voice cold, delivering the final, crushing blow. "Julian is arrested, Leda. Attempted armed robbery. He's at the precinct right now. But before you call a lawyer, you need to know what he found in my safe." I heard her gasp, and then I told her the entire brutal truth. The adoption, the death certificate of Eliza Rose Thorne, the fact that she was never my biological heir, and the updated will that explicitly excluded her. "Your entire life, Leda, your marriage, your ambition, was built on a lie you told Julian about your parentage to secure his loyalty. And that lie just cost him his freedom. And you? Your entire future. You married a thief, and you were trying to rob me with him. And now you have nothing." The sound that came from Leda wasn't grief. It was pure, terrifying, primal rage. The sound of a multi-million-dollar dream shattering. The revenge was complete. Julian was facing prison for both robbery and embezzlement, thanks to the evidence he himself brought, and Leda was left with a collapsed marriage, 0 inheritance, and the agonizing truth that she was the daughter of a simple mechanic, with no legal tie to the name and fortune she had always craved. I spent the rest of the night with the police, calmly detailing Julian's long history of entitlement. As the sun rose, I finally felt the weight lift. I hadn't just protected my money, I had protected the integrity of my late wife's memory and delivered justice to 2 people who had poisoned my life with their greed. The arrest of Julian didn't bring me joy, it brought closure. I didn't celebrate his downfall, but I celebrated the fact that I was finally safe from their calculated greed. Leda tried to fight back, calling me hysterically for days, first begging for forgiveness, then threatening to expose my late wife's secret, the adoption, to the world. I simply told her, "You've already lost your husband to prison and your inheritance forever, Leda. If you tell the world you were adopted, you only confirm that you have no legal claim to my wealth. You're only hurting yourself." The silence on the other end of the line was the sound of her final defeat. She finally understood that I had prepared for every outcome, and her last weapon was useless. She ultimately divorced Julian, but she was left with nothing but crippling debt and the shame of marrying a criminal. My revenge wasn't motivated by spite. It was an act of self-preservation and justice. I had spent years watching my daughter become corrupted by Julian's desire for unearned money, and the attempt to rob me confirmed that I could no longer save her. I had to save myself. I updated my will immediately, ensuring my assets would be placed in a charitable foundation dedicated to supporting honest tradespeople, people like the mechanic I once was. Leda received nothing. The moral of the story: the truth I kept locked in that antique chest for 3 decades wasn't just a secret about Leda's birth. It was the key to my defense. It taught me a vital lesson. Trust is not a given. It must be constantly earned. I spent years watching, waiting, and documenting, not out of paranoia, but out of necessity. Julian thought he was walking into the home of a harmless old man looking for cash. What he found instead was a meticulous paper trail that led straight to his own prison cell and exposed the lie at the heart of his marriage. Never mistake simplicity for stupidity. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the power. The ultimate revenge is not giving the betrayer what they want, but proving that their greed blinded them to the elaborate trap you've been calmly setting all along. Closure and final thought. I still live in the same house. It's quiet now, filled with the real memories of my late wife, not the false promises of my greedy daughter and her husband. I found peace in knowing that I used my life savings and my personal secrets to deliver justice, not just wealth. My last wish is that Leda finds her way back to the simple, honest values she abandoned for luxury. Until then, my doors and my legal secrets remain locked. If you thought Julian's robbery was reckless, wait until you hear the story of the man whose own son changed his father's medical directive on his deathbed just to steal his business. His revenge was so perfect, he showed up at the will reading and announced he was donating his entire estate to the nursing home staff who actually cared for him. Subscribe to Iron Revenge and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next story of ultimate family justice.